Hi everybody, it's Nancy, and today I wanted to do a quick video on some tips and tricks I have on layering stamps. So today we're going to be using the new Hero Arts layering turtle. On the back, it's layering sea turtle, CM165. You can get this on Hero Arts website, which is heroarts.com. Also, Simon Says Stamp has some, and I'm sure, if you looked it up online, you could get it. On the back are the directions. So you have your solid stamp, some detailed stamp, and then even more detailed stamps. And we're going to focus on the turtle today. There's also a flower and a starfish, but we're going to focus on the turtle today. So this is an easier layering stamp. If you're new to layering stamps, I would start with something easy like this. The shapes are pretty simple. So the first thing I do when I get a layering stamp is I number which order to stamp them. And I know that sounds pretty silly, but just to give you an idea, so the solid turtle obviously is your first layer. Here are the arms, legs, and this set here closest to him, that's your second set. And the reason you can tell is there is a line on each one of these. So that's a line, it's almost like an outline. Okay, so those are number 2. And then number 3 are the dots. So 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3. So I always line them so I have an idea. The other thing I do, besides trying to figure out my colors, is I try to stamp out a guide. Now what I mean by that, and here's one I already did, which came out pretty good, is I will start off stamping it as you normally would, and I am going to use my Misty. A layering tool does help. You don't have to have a layering tool. It does make it a little easier, especially if you're mass producing. So we're going to start with the solid image here. I'm going to cheat here and use my little guide. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is stamp that base layer down. I'm using a new Stampin' Up! Color Lemon Lime Twist. It's a really bright green. I thought it was going to be more neon, but it's not. It really is like a lime green. It's not too bright. So I'm using that as my base color. Make sure you get full coverage. Now I missed up some there because of the magnet. These bar magnets are nice, but this one's raised up a little bit. So that's okay. That's why we use the Misty, because we can restamp. And you can see I got ink all over the door, but that's not going to transfer to my paper. Alright, so that's the first layer. Don't worry about that. It'll even out as it dries, and we're going to cover it up anyway. Clean that up. Now, what I would do if this were my first time stamping this stamp is to get an extra piece of acetate. Now, you guys all have acetate laying around, and if you say, well, I don't have any acetate, on the cover of this stamp set, it came with the black printed part of the acetate, and then it came with a cover of acetate. I cut that off, as you can see. Okay, so what I do then is I stamp again, putting this back into the Misty. This is the acetate that was on top. So again, this was the top cover, so you can see the tape there. This was the top cover of the stamp set. Got it? So I took this piece of acetate off, put it in the Misty, lined it up to where my turtle is. It's not perfect here. Okay, and I just stuck the acetate down. We're just going to use the magnet to hold it. All right. Once the acetate is down, you're going to stamp that again, but you're going to stamp it with Stays On ink. I know some of you are like, Stays On ink on photopolymer stamps. It's fine. It's not going to kill your stamp. What you do want to use immediately after stamping this, which stays on stamp, is you want to use a very good cleaner, like the Hero Arts cleaner, a really good stamp cleaner, and you want to clean that stamp off. You want to get that stays on ink off of there. You can use stays on ink with photopolymer stamps. Yes, it may stain the stamps, which is fine. You just want to make sure you clean it up really well when you're done. Okay, so the first layer is always the easiest layer, right? All right, so now's the harder part, the second layer. Now there's two parts to stamping the second layer. There's the shell, and then there's the legs and his head. So remember, the second layer I told you was the layer with the stripes. So we're going to start with his head and his legs first. You won't be able to fit the shell. I don't think you will. Yeah, you won't be able to fit the shell and the arms and legs all the way around. So we're going to do, actually, we're going to do the shell first. So we're taking the number 2 shell, which is this one, the one without all the details. And this is pretty easy to line up. You don't need a guide yet. And you're pretty much going to eyeball it. Now, the little tip of his tail here, which is the bottom of his shell, I'm sorry, is going to line up with the tip of his tail right here. And then this part, you want to line up the rounded part there with his neck. But there's no like distinct marking. So you don't want it too high. You don't want it too low. You want to kind of put that right in the middle. And you want that little pointed part to point towards his tail. And you want that rounded part towards his neck. Now for the second and third layers, I am going to use the new Hero Arts Ombre ink, which is called Lime to Forever Green. This is a much darker palette. I did have the original ombre ink, which is mint to green. And one of the things that I wanted to show you guys, what Hero Arts has done, is they've spread out the ink pads. So look how close the older ombre ink pads are. So some of that bleeds into each other. The new ink pads are spread apart. And I don't know about you guys, but this new one smells. It almost smells like stays on ink. It smells like super glue. Woo, and that's the only one. I have a lot of ombre inks. That's the only one I've gotten that smells that way. But so you can see what's light and what's dark. If you don't know what's light and what's dark, take a scrap piece of paper, rub it across, and you can see what's light and what's dark. So on this one, I want to use the lighter end of the second layer of the turtle. I'm going to use the lighter end of the ink pad. So I'm going to stamp up his shell, knowing the lighter end are these two bands here, and just kind of tap back and forth, trying to stay out of the darker area, just the first two bands. Okay, and you can see I need to stamp a little more on the bottom. All right, so that looks pretty good. So then what we're going to do is we are going to line up the arms, and we want the second layer of the arms, which are the ones with the stripes. So the ones closest to his body. That head, those arms, and these arms, and they have, again, the straight lines on them. Now when you line these up, you want to line up the outside edge where the lines are. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. Okay, so these stamps have an outer edge on the top. So that's what we're going to line up here. We're going to line up the outer edge and the tip. So we don't want the stamp to go over the edge, and we want to line it up with this edge right here. And it will automatically line up to the body in the right spot, so you don't have to worry about the body. Some layered stamps I have to go like the third layer first. If they have an outline stamp, a solid stamp, that usually makes it easier. It just depends on how detailed the stamp is. I'm trying to line this up without getting my head in the shot here, guys. if that's lined up. Okay, same thing. I'm going to use the second layer of the ombre ink pad, just kind of moving that ink pad around, trying to stay within the first two bands of ink colors there. All right, that's pretty good. I could have moved those over a little bit, but that's right. So then I would take that piece of acetate and I would stamp that piece of acetate. Okay, so I would ink this up with StazOn and I would stamp that acetate. What this is going to do is in the future when I go to stamp this turtle again, if I have a problem lining it up, as you can see here, I was over to the right too far. If I had used my acetate guide, I would have known, put this down, put my magnet over it, to line my legs up in the right position, because I would stick it to the acetate and line up with the acetate because it's easier to see those black lines now where I stamped with the StazOn ink. You get the idea. And then pull the door open, remove your acetate, and then stamp it down. So that's layer 2. So we're going to use the acetate for layer 3. And like I said, this turtle is pretty easy to line up, so it wasn't too hard to do this one. But some of those layered stamps, there's so many different intricate designs that it's a little harder to do. Okay, so this was layer number 2. I have a layer number 3 acetate somewhere. Here it is. Okay, so I stamped layer 3 in orange. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp his body real quick because that's the easiest thing to line up for layer 3, and that's the more detailed image. And you can see through the photopolymer stamp and see where you need to line up those shapes. This one's pretty easy. So for the body, I'm going to use the darkest ink, which is the third line of ink there. Just sticking to that third band. Stamp that down. And that's what's neat about these ombre inks is you get 3 different colors of ink that you can use. And that stamped out pretty good. Alright, so now is the hard part. Is okay, I want to make sure I line up the detailed image. So I'm going to take this third piece of acetate and I'm going to line up where I think it's going to, where it should be on the turtle. Now, unfortunately, when I was stamping this, I had pulled up the magnet and it stuck and it pulled up the acetate. So just be careful when you line it up. But I want the legs, I want the dots all the way on the outer edge. So this third layer is just a more speckled look. And we want the head all the way up to the top. We want the legs to the top, the speckles, and then on the legs, on the outer part of the legs. So if you had a problem lining your stamp up, you would put this acetate down to where you best think it would work. Right there. Put your magnet on it. Now take your speckled stamps, and they should be pretty easy to see through where you want them lined up. And I know it sounds pretty simple, but some of these stamps, they're so detailed. If you are off just a hair, it ruins the look of the whole turtle or design, whatever your design is. So this one's pretty easy. All right, so let's just say, without getting my head in the way there, that I have that lined up correctly. I would then close the door. It's going to take the acetate with it. That's okay. We're going to move that guide. And this should all be lined up correctly. And again, we're going to do the third layer of the dark ombre ink here. Never mind my daughter playing in the background. Sorry about that. And there we go. So I hope that helps you out, guys. If you have a problem doing layered stamps, make yourself a guide, because this guide is great. It tells you what order you're supposed to put them in, and it tells you what colors would work out, but it doesn't exactly show you how to line the stamps up. You gotta kind of really look at it and figure it out. I mean, you can tell here, but if you have a guide that you make yourself out of acetate, and I number mine number 2 and number 3, so I have an idea. Okay, after the body, this is the second layer, and then this is going to be the third layer, and I'll have an idea, okay, where to put that stamp before I do it. So I hope that helps you out, guys. If you have any questions, please post them below. Love your comments. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and keep on stamping.